Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Christ Church. My name's Ben and I'm the vicar here at Christ Church. And it's great to welcome you tonight to the Hustings here at this church. And before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to do a brief overview of how tonight is going to work. If you need the toilets can be found either down that corridor behind you or down that corridor behind you. We are not expecting a fire tonight, but if there is a fire, there's a fire exit there, there's a fire exit there, there's a fire exit down that corridor, and obviously you can escape also through the main door. But you've not come here tonight to hear about toilets and fire exits. With only a week left until the election, tonight you get an opportunity to meet the candidates and hear their answers to some of your questions. We have all 6 candidates with us tonight. We have Edwin Black from the Green Party, Sean Halsall standing as an independent, Erin Harvey, Liberal Democrats, Patrick Hurley, Labour, Andrew Lynn, Reform UK, and Damien Moore, Conservatives. The structure of tonight will be that each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement, 1 minute for a closing statement, and between these we have some of the questions that you have already asked. Now, we received a significant number of questions in advance, and we've only been able to choose a limited number of them. And the questions tonight have been chosen by 2 considerations. Number 1 is the frequency of the question or similar questions asked. And number 2 was to try to cover a wide range of topics. Now, since we have had so many emailed in questions, and because we also have 6 candidates who each need to be given equal opportunities tonight, we're not going to be taking any questions from the floor tonight. The candidates have been given advance sight of these questions, and the order that the candidates will answer each question has been randomised. Candidates will get 1 minute to answer each question with a 15 seconds left warning given by myself. Now, candidates have been told not to interrupt other candidates as they are speaking. And in the same way, I would ask that if you could refrain from clapping, cheering, booing, sighing with kind of just some excess vigour during the hustings, that would be most appreciated. England are playing football on Sunday, and you will have lots of opportunities to both cheer and boo on Sunday. So we begin tonight with the opening statements, and candidates will have 2 minutes each. And we'll start with Edwin Black from the Green Party.
Thank you. I'm running for the Green Party to give you the tagline for a fairer, greener Southport. But essentially, I think we all know that the country is in dire straits, and what it really needs is investment. And if we wait for growth for that investment... The mic's not on.
I'll pause your time. Try now, Edwin.
Can you hear me now? Oh, yeah, there we go.
Wonderful. I'll restart your time.
So yeah, a fairer, greener Southport. But what we really need is investment. We can't fix the NHS, we can't fix schooling, we can't fix the waterways, we can't repair the pier, we can't do any of the things that we want to do without money. Now, if we wait years for potential growth that might not happen, then we're going to be waiting for all those services to improve. What we, the Green Party, have been willing to do is say we need to raise taxes. We need to raise the amount of money that's coming in, but we need to put that on the broadest shoulders. Our wealth taxes would only apply to a very small percentage of people who can afford to do it, and they would pay for us to have immediate improvements in the public services that we rely on and the social security net that we all don't want to depend on but may well have to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I'll pass over to Sean Halsall.
So, yeah, I'm Sean Halsall. I'm standing to be an independent. And unlike the other parties up here, I'm not going to be representing a party. I'm going to be representing you, the people of Southport. So one of the main things I'm looking at doing to make sure we turn this democracy back on its head is create assemblies across the town, all across from the northern parishes down to Birkdale, where residents can come and speak to me and instruct me what they want to do. I think we've got democracy back to front, where we elect MPs, we send them to Parliament, and we don't see them again until election time. I want to turn that upside down. I want you to be pushing me to make the decisions you want. And us all come up with that collectively. When we look at how we improve Southport, I think we need to look at establishing community and worker-owned businesses, so the money that's generated in the town stays in the town, and we create good quality jobs and work and wealth for this town. If we see Lord Street and it's half empty at the moment, why don't we fill them with interesting and great ideas that people from this town can come up with, and keep that money that's spent here in the town? Yeah, I'm Sean Halsall.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sean. Erin Harvey.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate here in Southport. The Lib Dems have a strong record here in Southport, and I want to continue a tradition of strong Liberal Democrat MPs who have put Southport first. And I just want to jog your memory a little bit first of what the Lib Dems have achieved here in the past. From the marine wall, which was vital to get future investment in the town, including the Ocean Plaza and revitalising the seafront, to the now closed Eco Centre and the Marine Way Bridge. From preventing what is now the RSPB Marshside from being development land and getting that protected, to getting lottery and heritage funding for our parks and piers. In difficult times, the Lib Dems have always prioritised Southport, and that is what I plan to do. I believe Southport has a great future, but we need more vision and we need greater commitment. We need regeneration focused on the future to make it a great place for our young people to thrive. Our once renowned Lord Street is no longer a shopping destination, but we can make it vibrant again. But we need an MP who believes in this town and will help to create the environment needed for startups and small and independent businesses. We need local solutions to local problems, be it the NHS or transport links. I know that people have a lot of concerns at the moment about the NHS, the cost of living and housing, and the Lib Dems have a bold and ambitious manifesto for a fairer society, putting equality at the heart of our manifesto, focusing on social care, which is often overlooked, and ensuring that a commitment to climate and environment underpins all of our decisions. But here in Southport, you need confidence that the MP you elect will stand up for you regardless of what party is in power. And that's what the Lib Dems do, and that's what we have done here in Southport for many years. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Patrick Hurley.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Patrick. I'm asking for your support and your vote next week at the general election. We need change in this country. We need a change of government nationally, but we also need a change of MP locally. The approach we've had from the Conservative Party over the past 14 years has been found wanting time and time and time again. In this town, there are too many young people leaving education without the skills to go into the jobs that are needed to be done in this country. After Brexit, we were promised untold riches. Instead, we've got the worst possible trade deal we could have had with our EU partners. We need to change that. We've got a Prime Minister who's obviously too weak to stand up to his wayward party. We need to change that. Every high street, every town centre you go into in the country, it's not just Southport, it's also Ormskirk, it's also Wigan, where my wife's from, it's Prescott, where I'm from originally. Everywhere looks tired and past its best. We need to change that. More and more crimes are going unpunished because there aren't enough police. And we need to change that too. The growth rate of the economy has been in the doldrums for well over a decade. People are feeling it in their pockets, in your bank balance, in your pay slips. We need to change that. But it's not just those issues, it's NHS waiting lists. It's lack of action on climate change, it's millions of potholes on our streets. The cost of living crisis, concrete roofs on schools falling in. It's a whole litany of things that the Conservatives have got wrong. It's a long, long list of failure, and it's well beyond time for a complete change.
Andrew Lynn.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Lynn, and I'm standing for Reform UK in the general election in Southport. Reform UK is a political party and a movement championing British interests through common sense policies aimed at protecting and promoting our common prosperity, safety and security, democracy, territorial integrity, constitution and culture. We are attempting to correct the harm that has been done to our country in the last quarter century by the repeated betrayals of all three establishment parties. It's time to accept that the old allegiances are dead. Labour holds working Britons in contempt. The Conservatives have conserved nothing, and the Lib Dems show little understanding of or sympathy for liberal democracy. All three have become merely power-seeking vessels captured by vested interests and careerist politicians. So Reform UK's mission is to revitalise British democracy by bringing back real choice into British politics. We would grow the economy by reducing tax and the cost of living for ordinary people and small and medium-sized businesses. Reform the NHS for zero waiting lists by ensuring that funding follows the patient. Fight to protect your standard of living, democratic freedoms and way of life, and take a zero-tolerance stance towards illegal immigration and ensure that net legal migration is reduced to zero. I am a practicing barrister by profession, not a party activist. I began my career after completing my PhD at St John's College, Cambridge, by working in Beijing at one of Beijing's top universities. Since then, I've had many years of experience in the professional world, both in the UK and overseas. Born and brought up in Southport, I have, even during periods working elsewhere, always maintained my permanent home in our town. And I now live here again with my wife and 3 young sons.
Thank you. And finally, Damien Moore.
Thank you and good evening, and I'm delighted to be standing as the Conservative candidate for the 4th time now in the Southport seat, although it is slightly changed with the northern parishes coming in. When elected in 2017, I was committed to ensuring investment came into our town, improving residents' lives, growing our economy and safeguarding our future. Today, I'm proud to say we've made significant strides forward in these goals. And while some people, for political purposes, might try and talk down our town, I will not do that. But looking back at the last 14 years, there have been some challenges. But nationally, since 2010, we had to form a coalition to undo the damage that Labour had done to our economy. And since then, we've created nearly 4 million new jobs, doubled the personal allowance, cut national insurance, introduced the national living wage, and increased the state pension this year by £900. And our investments in the NHS are at historic levels, with new doctors and nurses being recruited. And our streets are getting safer, with 20,000 new police officers, leading to a reduction in crime on the streets of this country and the streets of Southport. But none of this will matter if we can't defend our country, and that's why I'm proud that we've committed to the 2.5% increase in funding for our armed forces, because the world is becoming an ever more dangerous place. But at the local level, I fought tirelessly for Southport, for its economy, to improve the lives of ordinary people here, to ensure that our communities are well served. The £38.5 million town deal, which was actually £13.5 million more than I said I'd get in 2019, is already starting to pay dividends, with private industry and private investment coming in. The new Theatre Convention Centre, Enterprise Arcade, Market Hall and Lord Street are all examples of this. And whilst others will scaremonger, I want to set the record straight. I fight day in, day out for our town to bring in growth, investment and opportunity for everyone that lives in Southport.
Thank you to the candidates. We now come to the questions that you have asked and emailed in. Each candidate will get 1 minute per question. And the first question comes from Elizabeth, and it's this. Southport has an ageing population. In 2019, Boris Johnson promised he would fix social care once and for all. Sadly, 5 years on, there has been no progress in achieving this, impacting individuals and clogging up the NHS. Can the candidates tell me what they recommend as a workable solution? We will start with Patrick Hurley.
Now, I thought it was a bit of a cheat when I got told that I'd get advance notice of these questions, because I'd much rather just be given them on the night and have to come up with an answer. But then I thought, well, no, because it gives us an opportunity to set out precisely what we're going to be doing for our programme of government. And Boris Johnson did promise he'd fix social care once and for all, and I'm sure he didn't mean a word of it, because he didn't also mean a word of it when he said that he would rebuild 40 new hospitals or employ 20,000 new police, or level up the country. It was all rubbish from start to finish. The workable solution that we've got to come up with as a party is to deal with the inconsistent standards, the chronic staff shortages.
15 seconds.
We're going to be bringing in a national care service with a principle of home first, which means that people don't feel the need to go into a care home if they're still able to live at home. We'll also finally be working to develop a local partnership between NHS and social care providers.
Andrew Lynn.
Well, to improve our care system, we need to make work pay for care workers. So we would propose lifting the income tax starting point to £20,000 per year. This would free 7 million people from paying income tax and save every worker almost £1,500 per year. Now, that's every worker, but we would also focus on ending staff shortages in the NHS and social care in particular. And it would be our policy to provide that all frontline NHS and social care staff pay zero basic rate tax for 3 years. So basically, the first £50,000 would be tax-free. When it comes to care, as with other aspects of our life, the important point is to do no harm. When they prohibited or they mandated care workers to have the vaccine, the government stepped in and actively caused harm and damage to the care profession.
Time. Damien Moore.
Thank you. Well, it is about investing, and we are investing up to £760 million to improve social care. There is an £86,000 cap on social care costs, and we are expecting to ensure the system gets an extra £8.6 billion over the next 2 years. But let me make something absolutely clear. We keep having this discussion, this debate about social care, and it will never, ever, ever be fixed until it stops becoming a political football, tossed around by parties at election time during the year, and it has got to stop. What we need is a proper royal commission that looks into social care and that provides for this country a social care system that works, is not used as a political football with promises made, and making sure that people are getting that dignity and that quality care in old age.
Edwin Black.
As I mentioned in my opening statement, the NHS, the care services, they are going to require a lot of money. What Patrick didn't get round to saying was the Labour provision is to increase funding by £1.8 billion in the first year. The Green Party would think that 8 billion is needed. That's what we've seen in the care system in the NHS that is the shortfall. Again, we're the only party willing to say that we will raise that money immediately. Sorry. I'm very sorry, I've choked there.
No
I
problem.
can't read. But yes, funding is what we need. Funding is how we will get out of this hole. Funding is how we will improve care. Funding is how we will improve the NHS. We need to pay people properly. We need to fund the services properly. We need the money to do that. We need more tax revenue.
Thank you. Sean Halsall.
Yeah, the care system, we completely undervalue the people in that sector, working in that sector. I've got personal experience, so my mum had MS and had carers coming in. I've seen the absolute angels they are and the work they do for looking after people. We need to pay them properly, we need to give them good terms and conditions and decent pensions and keep people in that sector. If we're going to have a constant churn of people coming in and out of that because they're undervalued, then we're never going to get this right. We need to properly value the people who look after us and our loved ones.
And finally, Erin Harvey.
Thanks. So the Liberal Democrats are the only ones who put social care really at the front and centre of our manifesto. And I'm really pleased that we have done that, because here in Southport we have over 60 care homes and a quarter of the population who are over 65. And I've visited some local care homes during this campaign, and I've heard from staff how individuals are often stuck in hospital longer than needed whilst waiting to find residential care and have little choice in the care that they are provided. So the Lib Dems have pledged an initial $4 billion per year to introduce free personal care for all those who need it, based on the policy that we've rolled out in Scotland. We want to establish a Royal College of Care Workers to improve the career progression and a higher carers minimum wage, because they are the backbone of this industry.
15 seconds.
Okay. We must end the postcode lottery of services, and I believe our plans on social care will work because they have been drawn up by somebody who is a carer himself, and because we are willing to work cross-party in the best interest of those who need care to establish a real solution for the long term.
Our second question for this evening comes from Jed, and he asked, figures on the House of Commons Library constituency dashboard show that per pupil school funding in Southport lags around 10% behind national and regional averages. Why does this disparity exist, and what would you do to close the gap? And we're going to start with Andrew Lynn.
Well, the House of Commons Library figures are from 2022 and 2023, before the transition to direct schools funding. The average in England per pupil was £5,620. In the North West, £5,604. In Bootle, £5,531. And in Southport, it had dropped to £5,167. So, based on these figures, funding per pupil for the North West region and Bootle has been close to the national average. It would appear that Southport has been hit with a double whammy, once from central government and a second time from being in Sefton. What would we do? We say it's a question of priorities. If we can spend £30 billion per annum on net zero, or £12 billion per annum on foreign aid, then we can pay £500 extra per pupil in Southport.
Erin Harvey.
So, having spoken to some local school governance professionals, there is an issue with the formulas and a disparity in funding received per child here. And it didn't help that in 2016, the Conservative government slashed over £3 billion from funding for Southport schools. We know that early years gaps in attainment grow if there is inequality. The Lib Dems introduced the pupil premium. We're committed to tripling that, and it is desperately needed. Every teacher I speak to is firefighting every day. If elected, I would meet with Sefton Council, undertake an urgent review of school funding across Southport, looking at all the costs involved, pressure points, and where they are allocating the most spending, and engage with schools to hear more about their funding issues. But we can't think about funding issues without discussing SEND. We have a huge SEND crisis here in the UK. Councils need assurances that debts will be written off, and the Lib Dems will tackle this by giving local authorities extra funding and responsibilities on SEND and establishing a new national body.
Sean Halsall.
Yeah, it's obviously an absolute travesty. We see a fall in birth rate, so there's less kids going to school. this model of funding needs to change. We've got to look at things, how we do this differently. So I've been a governor at 2 different schools in Southport in my time on Sefton Council, until recently Lineker, and we see there the struggle to get money in and get kids into the school, and it's become competition between these different schools to get people in. We've absolutely got to look at directing the money where it needs to go and ensuring, like Erin said, that the SEND provisions are there for kids, because we have a massive shortage of places across Sefton, especially in Southport, and that's been a massive amount of casework I've dealt with as a councillor. And that needs to change. We need to look at how we direct funding to where it's needed the most.
Edwin Black.
Thank you. Education in the area and the country is a mess. I've got an 8-year-old son myself. I've actually pulled him out of school now. He's a SEND child. Then the provision for them and him was not adequate. But it's not the school's fault, it's the system's fault. I mean, looking at the kind of schools we have in this country, we've got community schools, foundation schools, voluntary schools, academies, free schools, grammar schools, faith schools, private schools. It's not really a surprise that there's no consistency in funding across the country and no consistency in the way that education is provided. Depending on where you live, you might go to a school that's run by a company or a church. Children should not be subject to a postcode lottery, depending on where they've been born. Then the thing that's supposed to tie them all together is Ofsted. That's supposed to be there to make sure all these schools are performing.
15 seconds.
And it's not adequate, it's not fit for purpose, and it doesn't meet the needs of students, parents or schools.
Thank you. Patrick Hurley.
Yeah, thank you. The question asks, why does the disparity exist and what would I do to close the gap? Well, the disparity mostly exists because it's based on a government national funding formula for schools. It's the government that has caused this disparity. What I would do is I would be advocating as a backbench MP for a better funding formula that takes more account of changing need. Erin mentioned SEND, and mental health support is a huge issue in our schools these days, but it's a huge issue that the government has not got to grips with, and I would be advocating for more mental health support in our schools. Labour's first steps that we're promising when we get into government, if we're honoured a week's time,
15 seconds.
is to recruit 6,500 more new teachers, modernise the curriculum, put breakfast clubs, improving behaviour into every single primary school in the country. That'll make a material difference to our children's opportunities.
And finally, Damien Moore.
So firstly, the national funding formula is fairer than what it was. The old national funding formula used to favour London and the big cities over suburban places and particularly rural places. So that has been changed. So there has been significant funding going back into those areas. And I want to see a great education system right across Southport and the northern parishes. School funding is now a record £60 billion, and we've earmarked £2.6 billion for SEND places and alternative provision. I think that is really important. It is an issue that is many parents face and they want to have corrected, and I want to support them in doing that. And in Southport, we've raised pupil premiums by 10%. But the worst thing is, if we start then charging VAT on private school fees and a lot of children enter the state sector, we'll need a lot of more money going into there and a lot more provision, because it will not be able to cope with the influx of children that will be coming out of private and going into the state sector.
Question number 3 is asked by Gordon. What is your stance on changing the permitted development rules to prevent new telegraph poles from being installed where people object and to prevent their installation in towns like Southport? And we're going to start with Damien Moore.
Well, Gordon, you must live not somewhere near me, because they were trying to do that where I live as well. I know exactly what you're talking about. We do need to change the rules on permitted development. Permitted development rules were never designed to put telegraph poles in to provide broadband to people's houses, and nor should they be. And I've been resolute in my support for the campaign group which has opposed this. I've involved myself in a number of meetings with ministers, with cross-party members of Parliament. I've even called the Chief Executive of Openreach. She knows exactly where I stand and you stand and Southport stands on this issue, and that is we don't want them anytime soon. Our history, in fact, as somebody did inform me when I went to see them, says that we should never be allowed to build them because there was a bylaw. There's no need for them. We want our historic streetscapes looking good and not impinging on people's lives. no, we need to change these rules.
Sean Halsall.
Yeah, my answer will be very quick on this. This is what the Assemblies is all about. It's if you look, you will design how your area looks. You will make them decisions. It's up to you. It's not up to me how your street looks, if you want these telegraph poles or not. It's up to the people who live in these areas. So I would, form assemblies and let people make them decisions for themselves.
Edwin Black.
Echoing what Sean has said, choice is the fundamental issue here. There are better services you might be able to get through a telegraph pole if you want them, and the whole street wants them, then great. I've got telephone poles at my place. It doesn't bother me. But the fundamental thing is choice. There's no reason the cables can't be laid underground. They just BT Openreach just want to save money. At the end of the day, the permitted development rights mean there is no requirement for the telecommunication companies to have any kind of public consultation. And there not only should be a public consultation, but they should be held to what that consultation comes up with. People have the choices over their own streets and the way their own streets look.
Erin Harvey.
Agree very much there with Edwin and Sean. Absolutely, people need to have the choice. And having spoken to local residents, particularly in Cambridge Ward, where this is an issue, and the local councillors there, it's clear a lot of residents are opposed to them. So the best approach probably is to challenge the permitted development rules and maybe take the decision more locally. If local authorities have a bit more control over this, hopefully councillors and residents can more easily engage with the process. And I do agree that having some kind of consultation is really important. Southport historically has very few telegraph poles, and there are quite a few covenants, particularly Fleetwood Road, for example, that these cables should not be underground, but this seems to be getting ignored. So we do need to support residents if they are really opposed to this.
Andrew Lynn.
Yes, the overhead cabling has been proceeded with without sufficient consultation with stakeholders and also with local residents. In my view, overhead telegraph poles can obviously constitute an eyesore and be a real detriment to a community. So I would be in favour of changing the permitted development rules to require planning permission for their installation, with residents given the right to present their case in objection.
And finally, Patrick Hurley.
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the most appealing things about Southport is its lack of overhead cables and the fact that the streets look beautiful. I want to make sure that we keep it that way. If I'm elected next week, I will be taking this up in Parliament on behalf of the people of Southport. A lot of people have been in touch with me about this. But here's the thing. Openreach should never have been allowed to put these up in the first place. This is an issue of a private company putting profit before people. Their competitors have got no problem with putting the cables under the ground. Why is it just this one company that is doing this thing? We need to make sure that we close those loopholes in the law to stop them doing what they're doing. And here's the thing there as well. Damien said that the legislation was never designed to allow telegraph poles. He should have a word with his parliamentary colleagues who allowed these telegraph poles under these permitted development rights 10 years ago. If they were never designed to allow telegraph poles, we should be closing that loophole. Thank you.
Our next question is from Ian. And Ian asks, do the candidates agree that there is a climate crisis? If so, what actions would the candidates support in this constituency to address the problem? We're going to start with Edwin Black.
I'm surprised that I absolutely agree that there is a climate crisis. Globally, we've just had the hottest May on record, and the preceding 11 months to that were the hottest months on record as well. Having just enjoyed quite a rather miserable May here, it's not that obvious that these things are going to affect us in Southport. But I live in Hesketh Bank. It's a farming community. Every winter I've seen the flooding get worse every year since I've been there. And the farmers can see that, and the farmers have spoken out about it. There are others at this table who will say that immigration is a bigger issue than climate change, and that's what needs to have focus on it. There are going to be around 1 billion climate refugees by 2050 who are going to be displaced from their homes and looking for a new place to live. If we don't start tackling this now, and we drop on net zero targets, for example,
15 seconds.
That's going to be a big issue. It's a national issue, it's not a Southport issue, but there are things that we as a country can do. We can play a huge role. We can force other countries to do things through trade agreements. We can encourage the other G7 nations to do what they need to do.
Time. Sean Halsall.
Yeah, I'd agree with most of what Edwin said, although it is absolutely a Southport issue as well. We live minutes from the beach. It would be wild to think that rising sea levels and extreme weather aren't going to affect us here. I think that we can look at this as an opportunity as well as a disaster on our doorstep, in that we can transform our economy and move to renewable energy, creating high-skilled jobs that we can bring to this region. I believe as well that tidal lagoons, sort of tidal barrages to create energy, is something that could work around here and generate energy for the community. And community-owned energy companies is absolutely something that I would back. We saw a wind turbine just stopped by the Labour Council to put the Cove Resort in not long ago. I think that was a mistake myself. I think we need to be looking at generating our own energy that serve us all and give us cheaper bills and stuff that we own.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you. Yes, I do indeed agree that there is a climate crisis. And I also agree with Sean that it's not just a crisis, it's also an opportunity, because it represents an opportunity to generate economic growth. There are going to be a lot of jobs in the new clean green technology industries of the future. As a Labour Party coming into government, I hope in a week's time, we're going to be having a green prosperity plan. We'll use investments from National Wealth Fund to create 650,000 new jobs, and I will be advocating that Southport gets its fair share of that. I will also be advocating that Labour's plan for Great British Energy disproportionately benefits places like Southport, because by heck we need it. Our gas bills, our electric bills are through the roof. We need a plan to get these bills down. We need a plan to deal with all of this, and we've got our plan by paying for it with a windfall tax on the oil and gas giants.
Damien Moore.
So first of all, I think some practical things is how we get around. We need more rail infrastructure. More rail infrastructure gets cars off the road and people get into the places that they need to, which is why I'm campaigning to get the Burscough curves restored. This will be done through Network North, which is the money we're now not using on HS2. But if you do want to drive here, that's fair enough. But if you do want to drive here and you've got an electric car, where are you going to charge it up? So we need more electrical charging points if people are to decide to use an electric car to come to places like Southport for a day out and be able to charge them up whilst they're here. The highly skilled, highly paid jobs in the green sector, absolutely, completely agree. We should be making more and engineering more of our solar panels and heat pumps rather than buying them in from China, which is completely made on dirty building methods. And what we need to do is make sure that we do this in a very responsible way, because to ask companies, to ask taxpayers to pay hundreds of billions of pounds extra is not acceptable.
Erin Harvey.
There is absolutely a climate crisis, and it has been ignored by the Conservative government for the past 10 years. And we have a town here that is on the forefront, the front line of climate change. We have to adapt and respond to that. We have to protect our natural environment like the marshlands and the seagrasses, because they will protect this town in the future from flooding. And I agree that we have an opportunity here. It is not just a crisis. We have a lot of potential here in Southport, but we need certainty in the renewables market, and that has not been given over the past few years. But we need that certainty to look into that tidal and wave innovation, because that could be great for our local economy, so Southport can prosper and be at the front leading the way on this. And we need more commitment from the council on those EV charge points and solar on buildings.
15 seconds.
And in a green industrial strategy to move away from oil and gas, and to work with the farmers in the north of the constituency to restore their woodlands and peatlands to help protect from floodings. So we need a strong commitment to climate change to help realise these opportunities.
And finally, Andrew Lynn.
Thank you. We are a pro-environment party. We want clean air and water and green spaces for all. The climate, however, always changes. We need to adapt to it. The UK produces only 1% of global CO2 emissions. China is approving new coal power projects at the equivalent of 2 plants every week. Net zero would impoverish the UK and only serve to drive industry overseas. Some people are getting very rich out of it. Renewables companies, often foreign-owned, as well as highly paid lobbyists, consultants and lawyers. We would therefore cancel net zero and we'd cancel renewable subsidies too. We are the only party who will stop this unnecessary impoverishment of the British people, saving around £30 billion per annum. Anybody who wants to keep a petrol or diesel vehicle and gas boiler had better vote for us, because the other candidates all want them banned sooner or later.
We move on to the next question, which is from Deb. And she asks, evidence shows that women and girls are disproportionately affected by various forms of violence, from physical abuse and sexual assault to emotional manipulation and harassment. What will you do as our MP to specifically tackle violence against women and girls? And we begin with Sean Halsall.
Yes, I don't need to be your MP to help with this. I'm already a director of a domestic violence charity, Phoenix Healing, CIC. But aside from that, we need to reform how we prosecute people. The police aren't catching enough people. There's not enough things going through courts. This absolutely needs tackling, and people who commit these crimes against women and girls need holding to account for that, and people need justice. But yeah, I will absolutely fight for every woman and girl who's been sexually assaulted, emotionally manipulated or harassed anyway.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, yes. I only have a minute, so I will rattle through some of the things that the Labour Party is promising to do on this issue when we're in government. We're promising to work to halve violence against women and girls in a decade. We will use every government tool available to target perpetrators and address the root causes of abuse and violence. We'll be setting up specialist rape and sexual offences teams in every police force. We're going to fast-track rape cases, having specialist courts at every Crown Court in England. We'll introduce domestic abuse experts in 999 control rooms so that victims can talk to a specialist directly. We'll properly fund women's services in the civil society sector. We'll strengthen legislation on this. We'll ensure there is a legal advocate in every police force area to advise victims from the moment of report to trial. We'll introduce a new criminal offence for spiking. We'll ensure schools address misogyny and teach young people about healthy relationships and consent. And I will personally work with our police and crime commissioners to make sure that their priorities on this area are well funded and given the right focus.
Erin Harvey.
This is a really important issue, and it's something that as a woman and a mother of a girl, I worry about a lot. A woman is killed by a man every 3 days in the UK. And I'm concerned that even today, so many women are not believed if they report harassment or abuse. And the way that women are treated in rape cases is appalling, with character being called into question. Women have the right to feel safe at home, on the streets, at work, everywhere they go, but we don't. The Lib Dems have a policy to try and address this, but here in Southport, as the MP, I would be a voice for survivors of abuse and work with local charities to ensure that services are known, sure of funding, and are signposted too. Help spearhead local campaigns to address violence against women and provide more education and outreach to communities. Help bring together schools, police and local organisations to develop more curriculum and workshops on GBV. And ultimately, help to be a voice to empower girls from a young age to have bodily autonomy, understand pressures they may face and be empowered to make their own decisions and feel confident in taking action when they're unsafe.
Andrew Lynn.
Thank you. We need a robust law and order and enforcement system. Reform UK's policy would be to commence an increase in police numbers, recruitment to increase to 300 per 100,000 of the population. That means 40,000 new frontline officers over a 5-year parliament. We would also commence zero-tolerance policing. That means prison for violent crimes and possessing a knife. We are concerned about child grooming in particular, which disproportionately affects obviously children, but also women. We would deport offenders holding dual citizenship, make child grooming an aggravated offence, improve safeguarding of victims and the vulnerable, and there will be no bail for grooming gang offenders.
Damien Moore.
Violence against women and girls is now prioritised as a national threat up there with terrorism, and we've created a lot of new offences for stalking, non-fatal, strangulation, coercive control. None of these laws existed before, and we've increased the funding for victims of 185 million. But the one thing that you can do as a Member of Parliament, the one thing that I've done is be there for those families, because I've seen some of those tragedies, sometimes when it's resulted in a death, and taken it upon myself to challenge a court and get a warning from a court if need be, to defend my constituents, defend their families and do everything I can to support them. You've got to be there for people who go through these horrific attacks and try and do everything you can to stop them happening in the future.
And finally, Edwin Black.
I think it's extremely important that we classify misogyny as a hate crime or gender-based crime as a hate crime. It would show that there is a willingness to work towards making this better, and a willingness to understand that the problem that women face in reality is men. There is a holistic way of dealing with the underlying current of misogyny in this country, and that begins at a very young age. We need to be speaking to young boys, speaking to young people about consent, about misogyny. And that way, that's the only way you're really going to build it up and make it a long-term solution, by changing the view of so many people in this country.
Our next question. This is from Mike. And Mike asks, there were no food banks in the Southport constituency in 2010. There are now at least 6. How has this unfortunate state of affairs come about? And what steps need to be taken to reduce substantially the need for food bank usage in the future? We begin with Erin Harvey.
So Southport's often seen as an affluent town, but we do have real pockets of poverty here, and I think we need to recognise that and be really honest about it to be able to address it in the future. And we know that this has come about through a lot of things at the moment, the real cost of living crisis, and I can talk about all the things the Lib Dems would do to tackle rising, fuel bills and food bills, but I think we really need to focus on the absolute lowest incomes, those who are the poorest in society, because we have seen a real rise in the working poor, people who don't earn that much money and are really struggling to survive. And if we look at those people, they're often families and have 2 or more children, and they are working families, and they are using food banks and they are struggling. And the cheapest and the quickest thing we can do to help them is to lift the 2-child cap on universal credit. That would give them all £3,500 more per year and help end reliance on food banks. There's 1 in 3 children in Southport that live in poverty, and we could end that straight away and lift them out of poverty if we lifted that cap.
Sean Halsall.
Yeah, I agree with much of what Erin said. It's abhorrent that we see people in work having to use food banks and on universal credit. What we see there is the government subsidising businesses paying workers less than they can survive on. For anyone to be in work, and let alone 2 people in a household to have to work full-time, still struggle to keep the lights on, keep the fridge full, we're living in draconian times. It is wild to see that state of affairs. So we need everyone to have a pay rise in this country. We need work to pay properly. It's not good enough to see people like Jeff Bezos and Amazon underpaying workers whilst not paying any tax or contributing to society, whilst his business using our roads, our healthcare, our education systems. We need to make sure we address them issues, close them tax loopholes, and make sure that work pays for people in this country.
Seconds. Andrew Lynn.
Thank you. We have to solve the cost of living crisis. We do that by putting money back into people's pockets, rather than allowing the state to spend it on wasteful bureaucracy. We would implement a raft of measures that would help the lowest earners in our society. We would raise the personal allowance so that there will be no tax on the first £20,000 of income. Because if you're only earning £20,000 of income, you need every penny of that. We would reduce energy costs by scrapping net zero and energy levies. That comes to a saving of about £30 billion per year. There's a big problem. Taxes have gone up, cost of living has gone up, but wages have not gone up. We are in a productivity crisis as much as a cost of living crisis.
15 seconds.
So we would implement an employer immigration tax, increasing national insurance to 20% from 13.8% on those who employ foreign labour, with certain exceptions for care and the National Health Service, and for small business, and that would raise wages for British workers.
Damien Moore.
Well, first of all, the Trussell Trust set up food banks in 2004. Secondly, there was a food bank before 2010. 90% of households were food secure 2022-2023, with just 3.3% using a food bank. We have raised the tax-free threshold and we've lowered national insurance, but we need to do more, creating better paid jobs for people. But we also need to produce the food ourselves in this country, because food inflation, if you don't produce it yourself, can cause an awful lot of the cost of the food. And again, if we do things like increase fuel duty, that will increase the cost of food, because food is brought in from around the world. If we produce more of our own, supporting our farmers, have internal drainage boards so the fields don't flood in the northern parishes, we'll have more of our own foods and food prices will be brought down.
Could we ask just that everyone keeps their emotions intact while the candidates are speaking? I'll let you at the end express some emotions you want. Hopefully they'll be positive, but just while they're answering questions, if you could just let them answer the question. Patrick Hurley.
Yeah, thank you. The question asks, how has this unfortunate state of affairs come about? Well, firstly, it came about because George Osborne and the Conservative Party took the wrong response to the 2008 financial crash, and it's led to 15 years of stagnant wage growth and an economy that doesn't work for ordinary people. But it's not just food banks, they're just a symptom of this. It's low wages, it's poor housing stock, it's high energy prices, it's people in this building, in this room tonight, feeling the pinch. People with good, well-paid, secure jobs who cannot make ends meet. But it's no good me just laying this out and saying, well, I'll just simply rebuild the house from scratch. The Conservative Party are pursuing a scorched earth policy. We are going to have to rebuild from scratch, and what that means is introducing free breakfast clubs in every primary school.
15 seconds.
We're going to be protecting renters from arbitrary eviction. We'll slash fuel poverty as much as possible, ban exploitative zero-hours contracts, and we'll improve employment support to get people back into good, well-paid, secure careers, just like they should have had all along.
And finally, Edwin Black.
I think we've all spoken about how wages need to go up, and that's very true. And I also actually agree with Andrew on increasing the tax bands for the lowest earners. But I think something that's missing from the discourse so far has been the fact that we are supposed to have a safety net in this country that we have paid for through national insurance. That is obviously not functioning if people are having to use food banks. That's what it's there for, to make sure that we are not struggling to the point where we can't afford food and we can't afford housing. The Green Party have calls for a universal basic income, which allows all of us to have that social security net all the time, and means that no one would ever be in a position of not having enough money to eat or to feed their kids.
Our next question comes from James, and James asks, do you support assisted dying? And we're going to begin with Patrick Hurley.
Everyone nearing the end of life must feel safe in the knowledge that they'll receive the best care and be supported to die in a place of their choosing. The palliative care workforce in this country work extremely hard to provide good care, and I'm sure you will all agree we owe a debt of gratitude to people like Macmillan nurses and Marie Curie nurses. Good palliative end-of-life care should enhance quality of life and provide emotional support to everybody. In all honesty, I haven't made my mind up about assisted dying. I lost my own wife to cancer back in 2006, and the suffering she went through seemed unbearable. And so I will be bringing a personal perspective to this, to whatever decisions I take, if I am given the opportunity to make a decision. I will promise you one thing, though: I will not rush the decision, and I will endeavour to make the most informed choice if a bill is brought before the next Parliament.
Damien Moore.
Well, I think this is an immensely complex and sensitive issue, and one that shouldn't be taken lightly. There's strong feelings on both sides, and they're being aired more and more. We need to balance the compassion that we feel for people's feelings with the vulnerable people that may be taken advantage of, and I think that's incredibly important. But we're talking about assisted dying, and I think it's also about assisted living, because I think sometimes some medical professionals don't give some people in hospital the full care that they could receive, saying, let's just make them comfortable, let's just get them through this, they don't want to be revived. No, if people want to be revived and want the full medical care, we've got to support those that want to live if we are going to support those that want to die.
Andrew Lynn.
Thank you. As MP, I would view this as a matter of conscience rather than a question of party politics. Also, my principle as a Democrat would be to consult widely with constituents to establish if there is a constituency-wide consensus. My personal view, having watched loved ones pass away, is to be cautiously in favour, providing robust safeguards are in place against abuse, to allow people to make their own choice in the face of the painfulness and the potential indignity of death.
Sean Halsall.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I've, like Patrick, not 100% made my mind up. And again, like Andrew said, it would be about consulting the people in the constituency, see what their feelings are. I think if this was something that I would support, it would have to come with extremely robust safeguards so that people aren't exploited. But again, it's not something I've 100% made my mind up on. It's a tough one.
Edwin Black.
I think what needs to be taken into account is that assisted dying may not be legal, but it does happen in this country or abroad. Those who have the means often travel to Dignitas and go to Switzerland, where the robust safeguards that they have got in place are something that we could look at for something ourselves. And those that can't afford it, unfortunately, quite often commit suicide at home. It does happen, it happens far too often. And it happens in an unsafe, unkind, uncaring way. And for that reason, I do agree that assisted dying should be legalised. As I say, we can look to Switzerland. They don't seem to have problems with that being abused. So we take the good parts of how they've done it and we apply it here. But again, it is a personal
15
decision.
seconds. And finally, Erin Harvey.
So unfortunately, dying is something that is inevitable for everyone. But having dignity and choice in the matter, I know is important to a lot of people. I think we've all seen loved ones who have been suffering and wish it could have been different somehow. And this is a really emotive issue for a lot of people. It's a very, very difficult one. It is an issue of conscience. And I know people have strong views both ways, and I would listen to those views. But I think I do agree with what Andrew said and what he put very well. And the Lib Dems believe that we must give Parliament time to fully debate and vote on this legislation. Focusing really on assisted dying for terminally ill, mentally competent adults with very strict safeguards, as Edwin said. I think that is the really important thing, is how we frame this and the safeguards in place.
We come to our final question, which is from Sue. What will you be doing to ensure the local council spends the money they should in maintaining Southport? For example, the pier and maintaining the gardens around the lake, which currently are a disgrace. And we begin with Edwin Black.
I am very much in favour of as much devolution as possible. Southport used to have its own town hall. the Sefton constituency used to be 5 or 6 different wards. And I believe that that should be the case again. Southport should have the choice over how it spends the money. And we shouldn't have to be fighting with Bootle and with the other parts of Sefton, with Formby, to decide where the money gets spent. Essentially, the reason that not enough money gets spent is because the councils don't have the money. Central government funding to councils was reduced by a huge amount by the Conservative government, and that has never been redressed. We would bring that council funding back to where it should be and increase that devolution so that we have more choice about what happens in Southport without having to worry about the rest of Sefton.
Erin Harvey.
So the Lib Dems have a really strong record of trying to hold the local council to account and get the money needed for Southport. But we have seen an unwillingness to invest in the town and a mismanagement of our heritage. Money from the town deal and other funds have been set aside for projects, but they all seem to have stalled. There's a lot of talk of incubator hubs and conference centres, but little action, and the piers being left to rot. So I think whoever is elected really must work closely with the council. We need a clear vision and a strategy for Southport that puts protecting its heritage and culture at the centre of a plan. We've put forward costed plans that don't use capital funds to the council to start reopening the pier and repairing it. This was voted down by Labour, who chose to spend more capital funds on vanity projects in Bootle. So we absolutely need commitments
15 seconds.
from the council, and whoever is elected needs to go and fight for this town at a local and a national level.
Sean Halsall.
Yeah, this is something where direct democracy can come into it again. By empowering people and getting them involved in the democratic processes, it will give the councillors something to worry about. If they see people engaging and organising themselves, they're going to start worrying about losing the seats. And that's how we do it. That's how we force Sefton to invest money in Southport, which is drastically needed, absolutely.
Andrew Lynn.
I believe among the panellists I would be uniquely qualified as an experienced lawyer to be able to apply my legal and forensic skills in oversight of important contracts, such as the pier renovation contract, because we know that has gone wrong previously. But I would like to focus on another point. I would like to see increased autonomy for Southport in local government. Local democracy has totally failed us, and it doesn't matter which party Southport votes for. In local elections, we will always have a Labour administration in Bootle. This has led to total apathy in local elections where the turnout is ridiculously low. We are being taxed without being properly represented. Whoever can fix this would begin the true rejuvenation of Southport.
Patrick Hurley.
The question asks, what will I be doing? Well, hopefully, if you'll have me, one of the first things I'll be doing is, starting next Thursday, getting rid of a Tory government that has repeatedly sucked money out of Southport. The council's budget in 2024 is over £200 million a year less than it was in 2010. £30 million town deals don't even touch the sides when compared to the amount of money that's been taken out of this town and the local area. But the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. We should not be pitting one town against another. The reality is the money has all been sucked out of Southport and the local area by a roll call of second-rate politicians. I remember the Conservative Party in the 1990s. I remember people like Michael Heseltine and Ken Clarke, and you could agree with them or disagree with them, but they were people of stature. Instead, the current lot just don't remotely stand up. Specifically on the pier, I think we should nationalise the pier, take it out of local authority control and agree and make sure that we got economies of scale with experts that can make sure that all of our piers across the country benefit from investment and maintenance budgets.
We've nearly got there. Could I ask that while candidates are speaking, that you don't call out passionately at them, just because it's very distracting for them and lots of other people in the room want to hear what they have to say. we finally come to Damien Moore.
Well, maintenance is something that this council does not do, and that's writ large with the situation with the pier. We knew in 2002 that the pier had structural problems after a botched job. And from 2002-2010, we had a Labour government that could have stepped in and rode in on its white horse and given it as much money as the council had asked for, but nobody asked for that. Report after report has been written where the pier has been described as in a poor state of repair, that things have gone wrong, and it's only getting worse due to the weathering. No one's raised that as an issue with me in the council. When I was negotiating for that town deal, we could have put the pier in there, but it's got worse and worse. And in 2017, the £2 million they got from the government, what did they want to do? Not fix the base, not fix the structure, build a helter-skelter and put more weight on it. What a ridiculous state of affairs.
So we come to the end of our questions and we move on to our closing statements. In these closing statements, candidates will have a minute and we will go in opposite order that we did the opening statements. So we begin with Damien Moore.
Thank you. I'm proud of my record in Southport over the last 7 years, being elected twice to deliver lots and lots of investment into our town. A plan for growth with the town deal, a plan for connectivity for the Burscough Curves and Green Lane link with Network North, a plan to restore our pier with the Seaside Heritage Fund. Don't give Bootle a blank cheque to spend your money on May the 4th.
Andrew Lynn.
Every single other candidate on this panel represents the status quo. They all stand, whatever they say, for a common agenda. High tax, big state, open borders globalism that has served the interests of merely our out-of-touch establishment, big business and pressure groups, rather than the ordinary men and women of our country. We offer something totally different. Common sense policies for the benefit of the British people as a whole. It has been a moving experience talking to the people of our town. So many have come forward to offer their thanks and support. They say we have given them hope after so many years of frustration at the dishonesty and incompetence of our entire political class. We have huge support throughout this town and this country. If there was ever a time to take a new approach, to make a leap of faith if necessary, this is it. You have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Vote Reform UK on 4th of July.
Patrick Hurley.
This election is about change. It's about changing government, but it's also about changing an approach that has been failing for too long. It's about changing our future, and it's about making sure that Southport's back on the up again. But if we want change, we need to vote for it. The choice here is between another term for a failing government and a failing approach, or a new MP with a new way of doing things. New governments don't come along very often. There's only been 2 changes of government in this country in the last 45 years. But this is a decisive year for the UK, and 2024 could go down in history as the year we finally get rid of a failing government, and we manage to ensure that for places like Southport, we finally put years of decline behind us and face the future with the confidence that comes from having competent, capable people running the country again. Vote Labour on July 4th.
Erin Harvey.
You'll have heard me talk earlier about local champions, and you'll have heard Patrick just talk about how the grass is not always greener. And that is the case with Labour. I grew up in a part of Liverpool with a lot of deprivation, and those areas have had Labour MPs for over 30 years, Labour councils with big majorities and a Labour mayor. And I grew up under Tory and Labour governments. Not only are those areas deprived, but they have declined further. In Liverpool, child poverty has gone up, homelessness has gone up, the city is dirtier, knife crime's gone up, and it's the 3rd most deprived area in the country. All I see is Labour incompetence, and I do not want those kind of stats for Southport, and I worry about Southport under Labour. Instead, we can have a local champion. We know that there is going to be change on the 4th of July, and Labour might win nationally, but here in Southport, we can have a local champion like Ronnie Fern and John Pugh, and I hope to follow in their footsteps to fight hard for Southport.
Sean Halsall.
So, yeah, you've got the opportunity to vote for something different on July the 4th. I'm giving you an opportunity to vote for someone not tied to a party whip, not taking orders from a party leader. I will be listening to you, not someone down in Westminster who's never stepped foot in Southport. And I commit to that. These assemblies are going to be a real thing. I will listen to you and take back what you want me to do down there. And we can all work together and start rebuilding that community and the fabric of society that Thatcher tore to pieces in 1979. So on July the 4th, vote for me, Sean Halsall.
And finally, Edwin Black.
To echo a bit of what's been said before, how is the best case scenario at this point Keir Starmer? Obviously we want rid of the Tories, well, obviously for most of us, but the alternative is not an alternative. The alternative is a slightly different shade of what we've had already. The policies, the differences are minor. Vote for real change and actual hope. If that means you want to vote for reform, if that means you want to vote Lib Dem, if that means you want to vote independent or green, I'd just encourage you to vote on your morals and vote on the policies that have been put in front of you, rather than purely vote on the basis that you're going to get someone bad out. Thank you.
Hustings are job interviews with the world watching you. So could we give a huge round of applause to all the candidates tonight? I just want to say a big thank you for coming. If you have a burning question you didn't get a chance, the candidates may be hanging around afterwards and you may get a chance to ask them. We've loved having and hosting you at Christ Church, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.